The captain beat her wings rhythmically, flying nearly blindly. Barely a dozen stars kept the night alive, and years of flying instinct guided her more than sight. The crisp chill of the air told her that she was well above the tree line, and her natural sense of direction told her that she was flying northeast, dead on course to arrive at the castle. Though she told herself to hurry, her wings beat at a steady pace, lulling her body into autopilot as her mind wandered. For the 100th time that night, a snapshot flared up in her mind. She was in the ancient ruins again, twilight sparkle in front of her. The stone beneath her hooves was even colder than the air around her. But twilight wasn't shivering as she glared up at Nightmare Moon, the elements of harmony floating around her and her friends. The captain remembered Nightmare Moon's face of assurance, a smirk that had been permanently etched on her features from the moment the ponies found her. And even now, with the elements before them, Nightmare Moon looked as if she didn't take them seriously. Then came the moment the captain couldn't stop thinking about. Twilight's element appeared and vanished, and the unicorn took a step back. The captain could only imagine her face of brief confusion. A moment later, she would be dead. But the scene ended there. A single snapshot of Twilight, not sure what to think, and the ever-smirking Nightmare Moon leering up before her. The captain knew it had never happened, but she could just imagine Nightmare Moon winking at her. "Thank you," she would have said, "for making this all possible." The captain shook her head, nearly rolling herself out of the sky as she caught her balance. Resuming her flight towards Canterlot, she looked towards the horizon as another star vanished. "Trixie will start her invasion soon," she thought to herself. "Those fools will die." Her wings beat on, her eyes glaring straight ahead. "I don't care," she answered the unspoken accusation. "What are they to me? They were nothing before they killed Spitfire, and now they're even less." Twilight's face flashed before the captain, but her heart stood firm. She knew she didn't actually care about Twilight. She was just some filly. But to see her come back, to actually have a conversation with her, Twilight was dead, and with her the whole future of Equestria. That was something the captain had long since accepted and made peace with. So why did that stupid unicorn have to come back? The captain shook her head again, careful this time not to upset her balance. "Focus," she scolded herself. "I need to get back to the castle. I need to warn Nightmare Moon about Trixie's lies." She nearly dropped from the air as the realization hit her. Why was she already bent on foiling Trixie? Because I hate her. And she might hurt Nightmare Moon. And the answer loomed up before her, overshadowing any other reason she could give. She hated to admit it, but denying it wasn't even fooling herself anymore. And because I don't want her to destroy New Ponyville. Fine, what of it? I don't want there to be needless death. Sue me. She crossed her hooves across her chest as she flew, sulking to herself midair. I'm just a nice pony. I don't feel guilty about ruining the world. The beat of her wings kept the silence at bay, as her last thought echoed in her head. She looked around for distraction, but the empty sky around her offered no solace. All right, fine. Maybe I do feel a little guilty. Maybe I do kind of wish I could help them, even if they did kill Spitfire. She sighed as she uncrossed her hooves, the anger flowing out of her. It's not like they started it, to be fair. I burned down Ponyville, and then I brought her with me to that hellhole. I should have died. I should have been hated. Not her. The captain's wings beat on, but the floodgates of her guilt had been opened. Through the air around her was nearly silent. Her head was a whirlwind of burdens. I might as well have killed her in the end. I killed Twilight and Spitfire and Ponyville, and every pony who has died since then. I killed the sun, and I created Trixie, and I did everything. It's all my fault. The captain felt the weight in her chest grow with every word, her breath becoming slower and slower. She had expected herself to cry, or scream at herself, but nothing came. All she heard was the sound of her wings beating in the void, flying her back towards the castle and away from everything. It felt like days, but couldn't have been more than a few minutes. She flew in silence. It doesn't matter, she finally told herself. It was reflexive at first, but she found herself latching onto it more and more with each silent second. It doesn't matter. Nightmare Moon is my friend now, not them. She's the only one I owe loyalty to. In the captain's mind, Twilight was staring at her with annoyance. It was a moment before the captain realized that this was a memory, not just another disjointed accusation. Twilight was covered in mud, a moment the captain hadn't thought about in months. Rainbow Dash turned her gaze away from the strange unicorn in front of her, alighting on a nearby cloud. "I'm Twilight Sparkle," the mud-covered filly on the ground stated, "and the princess sent me to check up on the weather." Yeah, that'll be a snap." Rainbow Dash waved a hoof towards the voice below her, mind already roaming elsewhere. "I'll do it in a jiffy, just as soon as I'm done practicing." "Practicing? For what?" Dash rolled over, leaning over the edge of the cloud. "They're Wonderbolts!" she exclaimed, pointing towards a nearby poster, the exact same edition she had in her room. "They're going to perform at the celebration tomorrow," she continued as she flapped lazily backwards onto another cloud. "I'm going to show 'em my stuff." "The Wonderbolts?" Twilight questioned. If Dash hadn't known any better, she'd have thought there was a hint of disbelief in that voice. "Yep," she answered nonchalantly. "The most talented flyers in all of Equestria." "That's them," Dash repeated. Was this egghead really not getting the picture? Psh, please, they'd never accept a Pegasus who can't even keep the sky clear for a measly day. Dash sat bolt upright, glaring at the smirking unicorn below her. "Hey, I could clear this sky in 10 seconds flat," she stated simply. The annoying unicorn beneath her lowered her brow. "Prove it," she challenged. "Oh, it is on," she thought as she took off, kicking the cloud beneath her as she launched up, wings powering her through the sky. She rocketed from cloud to cloud, letting the wind beneath her push her and pull at the deceived unicorn. Well within her boasted time, she landed on a small bridge in front of Twilight. "What did I say?" She rubbed her victory in. 10 seconds flat. She smiled as she flicked her hair back, savoring the look on Twilight's face. "I'd never leave Ponyville hanging." The captain's gut twisted and turned, her mind finally remembering what her subconscious had forgotten. The captain dropped from the sky, her form falling silently as the wind ripped past her ears. Any pretense of calmness was gone as she built up speed, her wings finally shooting out from her side. She held her head up, and the air pressed against her, letting the movement pull her out of her dive. With the extra momentum and the now frantically beating of her wings, she raced towards Canterlot Castle. It was nearly dawn, and that meant there was only one place Nightmare Moon would be. "All right, big brother, let's hear it." The sound of frantic preparations that engulfed the guardhouse were muffled by the walls of Big Mac's office, and the Red Giant himself leaned over his desk, on which a map had hastily been placed and pinned. The drawing on it lacked detail, but was obviously a bird's-eye view of New Ponyville's cavern. Big Mac remained silent for a moment, ignoring both mares in front of him. He knew his sister would know better than to interrupt his thoughts, but... "Well, guard leader?" Flashing Rarity a glance of annoyance, Big Mac turned his study to the map again. For a moment, he lifted a hoof and let it fall to the table, pointing at the very eastern edge. "This is their only entrance," he began slowly, "and that's our biggest advantage. The stone door into Everfree can't be opened from the outside at all, and after your two friends left, we smashed the pulley system. Still, it's just stone, and no telling how long that'll stop unicorn magic." Big Mac glanced at Rarity again, this time with a raised eyebrow. Rarity shook her head, confirming his fears. "Then we got this narrow stretch of tunnel up here." He dragged his hoof across the map a few inches, ending where the main cavern began. "Up to here. So, what defense do you have in place for that tunnel, brother?" Big Mac shrugged without moving his view of the map. Nothing. The silence that followed finally prompted Big Mac to look at the mares again, and he found them looking at each other worriedly. Big Mac waited until Applejack turned back to him before answering the unasked question. I can fit 3, maybe 4 ponies if they stand side by side, which makes it too wide to barricade. Our ponies don't even have weapons, or, more importantly, protection, to try and go hoof to hoof with them there. Even if we took down 1 royal guard for every stallion we lost, we have no idea what their numbers are. Then perhaps we could collapse the tunnel completely. Surely even their magic couldn't get through that. Rarity's eyes were filled with hope, and Big Mac almost paused before shutting her down. Afraid not, Mayor. Ain't got nothing to collapse 'em with. Neither explosions, nor unicorn magic. Well then, we are gonna fight 'em. Big Mac returned his gaze to the map, his hoof sweeping across the eastern end of the cavern. Here, he said simply. Applejack scratched her head for a moment. I mean a little more specific than that. The corner of Big Mac's mouth twitched in on what could have been a smile. A cavern ceiling has been riddled with stalactites since we got here. I'm sure you heard about the problem in the western part of town, Miss Rarity. Rarity nodded cautiously, trying to piece together the plan. There ain't so many on this side of the cavern, but I'm putting all my Pegasi in the air anyway. They ain't got any better than an earth pony behind the lines. And up in the air, they'll be safer while giving us air support, of a sort. Rarity brought a hoof to her mouth as she drew in breath. You're going to have them buck the stalactites down? Big Mac nodded, his face remaining impassive. It was Applejack who stifled a chuckle. We don't have to blockade the tunnel at all, then. They won't be able to avoid with all those rocks falling down. Big Mac nodded, but he finally looked at the map again. My Pegasi had already started clearing the ceiling above the bridge. I figured we could use the extra stone for our wall. And we don't want all those things getting bucked down on top of us, by mistake. I saw a whole bunch of ponies dragging things around by the bridge. Big red fella was ordering them around. Is that what they were doing? Building a wall? Big Mac nodded. That creek doesn't pose much of an obstacle if they want to ignore the bridge. But we can pile up enough stone and wood along our bank that'll at least make them think twice. Between the slippery rocks, moving water, and us pelting them with whatever we got, they're more than likely going to just try for the bridge. Rarity craned her neck over the map, rubbing a hoof along her chin. And we're constructing a wall along the bridge now, yes? Even with Earth Pony strength, that'll only hold unicorn magic for so long. So, what's our next line of defense? Big Mac lifted his gaze as he drew his hoof off the table, leaving the map for all to see. While the western quarter was marked by a dozen notes and arrows, most of the cavern was blank, with only landmarks and notable terrain detailed. With his voice more ponderous than normal, Big Mac sighed. If a third of my force wasn't bedridden in the hospital, we could barricade some buildings in town. If we had better arms and armor, we could go hoof to hoof with them in the streets and alleys. We know the area. If we had more food, we could barricade the safe house on the western edge of town and survive the siege for as long as we needed. Big Mac's gaze remained steady, but he took special care not to make it accusing. But we have none of that. We have the wall, and one small tunnel in that safe house that we will need to evacuate an entire town, one pony at a time. For a few moments, no pony said anything. Rarity turned away from the map, her ears drooping on her head as she hid her face. It was Applejack who finally muttered, Then, all we can do is fight it out till we're slaughtered. Of course not, sis. Big Mac looked at his sister with wide eyes, taken aback by her hopelessness. Big Mac stuck his chest out and raised his head, looking towards the wall of photographs to his right. All but the old, sick, and young have volunteered to help with this fight. We have enough ponies to man these defenses fully. We just don't have any to spare. Unicorn magic may be awfully strong, but no pony can build like Earth ponies. Mark my words, that wall will hold long enough. Applejack cocked her head, ears pricking up slightly. I hope so, Big Mac. We don't know how long Twilight's going to be gone for. Big Mac never laughed, but he did crack a smile at his sister's worry. Maybe all the stress is getting to her. Can't say I blame her. Heh, right, the unicorn. You mentioned something about her plan, but I'm not banking on some kid's legends and myths. Big Mac shook his head, as if trying to shake a foolish notion loose, his smile lingering longer than normal. But, in all seriousness, our goose ain't cooked yet. As long as the resistance is out there, we might stand a chance. Hurry, Twilight! We don't want to get stuck out here. Twilight barely heard the voice from above her, her ears filled with the ragged sounds of her breathing and the crunching of sticks beneath her hooves. For a moment, the only sound was rushing air as she leapt over a log before crashing down on the soft mush of the forest floor. Not missing a beat, she kept running as fast as she could through the growing darkness. After the two mares had emerged from the cave in New Ponyville, even the rot-heavy stench of the swamp tasted like fresh air. The two of them had set off at a brisk pace through the woods, following the trail that had originally led them to town from Zikora's hut. It had only taken a few minutes before the trail became harder to follow, though not because of the undergrowth. The light from the moon had vanished, and as dawn approached, even the stars were winking out one by one. Twilight risked a glance overhead, straining to see the skeletal tree branches on the horizon. 3, maybe 4 stars left? How many minutes did they have before the forest was plunged into complete darkness? The lack of light that they were dealing with now was nothing compared. Twilight's thought halted as her hooves caught on something that refused to give. Not having time to reprimand herself for stargazing before her face slammed into the ground, she lay there for a moment, panting, before rushing for air and a pressure on either side of her announced another pony. Come on, Twi. Up you go. There. Now come on. We have to keep going. Without a word, Twilight forced one hoof in front of the other, careful to keep her eyes on the ground. Every shadow could be a crack in the earth, or an exposed root, and with the failing light, there was plenty of shadows to look out for. She was running nearly blindly. Both her and Rainbow Dash knew that. But if day descended while they were in the middle of the Everfree Forest, then there was no way they'd make it out before the next nightfall. Twilight risked another glance at the horizon. Her heart sank as she realized that she could count the number of stars left on one hoof, which was really a roundabout way of saying 1. Her blood pumped as she returned her gaze to the ground, furiously dodging the shadows. Though she found plenty to jump at, she noticed that her hooves were catching on fewer objects than they had, something her throbbing limbs were grateful for. She forced herself to slow down a bit, her mind insisting that there was something important in that detail. Head low to the ground, too tired to even lift it as she trotted. It hit her just as her friend in the skies confirmed it. Twilight! The trees are thinning out. I think we're almost there. A cough that could have been almost a laugh escaped Twilight's throat. Taking the edge off of her fatigue, forcing herself into a full gallop, Twilight gritted her teeth. They had done it, albeit barely. They had gotten through the entire... A tiny flash appeared on the horizon, the last twinkle of the final star. The reflection gleamed in Twilight's eyes as they opened wide, and with her next blink, the world was plunged into daybreak.